This is your kind of like express lane to understanding all this stuff you're curious about.
Yeah, you give us the sources and we give you all the main ideas. You get the insights without having to do all that work, right?
That's exactly it. You sent us some stuff about reflective practices. Super interesting.
Yeah.
And specifically, we're going to be looking at Gibbs's reflective cycle and street epistemology.
Right, and we're going to look at the broader concept of reflective evaluation, too.
Yeah. So we really want to wrap our heads around all these different ways of thinking about our experiences and beliefs, and most importantly, how these can help you grow.
Yeah, that's the mission for today.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that Gibbs's and street epistemology and reflective evaluation all kind of focus on critical thinking and like self-examination,
Yeah.
but they all go about it in different ways.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So let's start with Gibbs's reflective cycle. I mean, this goes back to 1988, right?
1988, Graham Gibbs. He was really coming at this from the idea that we learn best by doing and then reflecting on that. That's when the learning happens. By really digging into that experience, you go beyond just surface level understanding.
It was like a structured kind of unpacking, right?
Yeah, he had a clear 6-stage process. You can think of it as a framework for really picking apart some event that you went through.
Okay, yeah. So the first step is description, just like what went down.
Yeah.
Like, what were the basic events? Who was there?
It's just the facts.
Yeah, just the facts.
Then you go to feelings.
Okay.
And this is all about what was going on in your head at that time. What were you thinking and feeling? You're acknowledging your own reaction to it.
Gotcha. And then evaluation.
Right, evaluation.
Okay.
So now you step back and you assess what happened. What went well? What could have been better? What were the good parts? What were the bad parts?
And then analysis.
Yeah, this is where it gets interesting. This is where you start making connections. Like, what does it all mean? Why did things turn out the way they did? What were the underlying causes?
So like, trying to get to the why.
The why behind the what, exactly.
Yeah.
Then you've got conclusion. So you've thought it all through, and now you think, what else could I have done? What might have been a better way to handle things?
Oh, so it's looking back and saying, like, if I had known then what I know now.
Right, right. And then the final stage is the action plan. Now we're talking about putting it all into practice. So if something like this happens again, what are you actually going to do differently based on what you've learned?
So you take all that reflection and then you kind of build it into something you can use later on.
Exactly.
Okay.
This is like a really structured and internal process, right?
Yeah.
You're looking inside at what you went through and trying to learn from it for the future. Yeah. And you see Gibbs cycle used a lot in education and professional development. Like, it's huge in healthcare and teaching. It's a good way to help people keep learning and improving over time.
It's like a roadmap for getting better.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay, so that was Gibbs's. Let's talk about street epistemology. This one feels kind of different, doesn't it?
It does. Street epistemology draws on the Socratic method and critical thinking. But instead of personal experiences, it's all about your beliefs. Like, how did you form them and why do you hold on to them? It can actually be really freeing to dig into the why of your beliefs, even if you don't change your mind in the end.
So less about what happened to me, more about why do I think this is true?
Yeah, you got it. And the goal is to encourage critical thinking about those beliefs, to get people asking, how do I know this is true? What are the reasons behind my beliefs? Fostering a sense of inquiry and maybe even shaking up some of that rock-solid certainty we tend to have.
I like that. So it's about questioning how we arrived at those beliefs in the first place.
Exactly.
Not necessarily the beliefs themselves.
Right. It's about the process, the method. And it's done through dialogue, right? Unlike Gibbs's, which is more of an internal thing.
So not sitting down and journaling, more like talking it out.
Yeah, more interactive. Street epistemology involves asking questions, like those probing Socratic questions, to get the person to really look at their own reasoning. Not to tell them they're wrong, but to get them thinking.
So leading them to challenge their own thinking.
Exactly. You see this a lot in debates, public discourse, even just one-on-one conversations, especially when you're talking about things that people feel really strongly about.
Okay, that makes sense. So we have these two very different approaches. Gibbs, which is personal and structured, and street epistemology, which is conversational and about beliefs. And then there's reflective evaluation, which seems like a bigger idea that encompasses both.
Right. Reflective evaluation is like this blend of looking inward and actually assessing what you did and what happened. It's not just thinking about it. It's evaluating your actions and their results. Combining that self-reflection with a more structured assessment turns everyday experiences into these targeted learning moments.
It's about being intentional about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Holy cow, we almost forgot to asked subscribe now.
Oh, okay.
It's like, are they just so busy
Well, forget.
with the farm life that they forgot to ask us to subscribe?
They got distracted by a runaway calf or something.
I know.
And this idea has been around for a while, right? The stuff we were looking at mentioned some important thinkers who laid the groundwork.
Yeah, they talked about John Dewey back in 1933 and Donald Schoen in 83. They were both big on the idea of reflection, especially for professionals.
Yeah, for professional growth. Reflective evaluation takes their ideas and adds a more formal evaluation piece.
So it's not just thinking about what you did, but also like grading yourself.
Yeah, in a way, it's about trying to figure out what your assumptions are, what your biases might be, and where you can get better. It's about being really honest with yourself.
Okay, let's break down this whole reflective evaluation thing a bit more. We've got two main parts, reflection and evaluation. So when we talk about reflection here, it's not just Gibbs's, it's any kind of.
Right, it's bigger than Gibbs. Reflection is all about looking inward, examining your experiences, thoughts, and feelings. It's about introspection, about thinking critically about how you reacted to things, and questioning those assumptions you make without even realizing it.
And then evaluation, that's the more structured part, right? It's
Yeah.
about actually sizing up what happened.
Exactly. Evaluation is about looking at your actions and decisions and saying, okay, what were the results? What did I do well? And where did I mess up? The whole point is to use that assessment to do better next time.
So reflection helps you understand the why behind things, and evaluation helps you figure out the what and then what to do about it.
That's a good way to put it. They work together. Reflection gives you that deeper understanding, and evaluation turns that understanding into concrete actions.
All right, so why should you, our listener, care about reflective evaluation? What's in it for you?
Well, for one, it can really help you keep learning and growing throughout your life. When you regularly analyze your experiences and what comes out of them, you develop this mindset of always wanting to learn more and being able to adapt to new things. It's like you're turning your whole life into a learning experience.
You never stop growing. I like that.
Yeah. And another big benefit is increased self-awareness. You get to know yourself way better when you take the time for introspection. You figure out how you think, how you react emotionally, what kind of learner you are. That kind of self-knowledge is super valuable for personal growth and just navigating the world. It's like understanding your own internal operating system.
Right. And the more you understand yourself, the better decisions you can make because you know what you're working with.
Exactly. Plus, it helps you think more critically. When you make a habit of questioning your assumptions and analyzing things in a structured way, you become a more thoughtful and insightful person.
Which then leads to better decision making, right?
Absolutely. When you learn from the past and understand what drives your choices, you can make better decisions in the future. It's like you're less likely to keep making the same mistakes.
And you're better equipped to deal with new situations because you have a framework for figuring them out.
Exactly.
Take the first step toward meaningful reflection.
Right.
Sign up at navigatingbeliefs.com for free.
It's all about taking action.
Yeah, not just thinking about it, but actually doing something.
Which is often the hardest part. And this stuff is really valuable in your career, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Reflective evaluation is like a secret weapon for professional development. If you can look at your own performance, learn from your successes and failures, and change your approach when you need to, that's a huge advantage. It helps you keep growing and stay relevant in any field, especially when things are changing so fast.
Makes total sense.
Okay.
Okay, so how can our listeners actually start doing this in their own lives?
Mhm.
What are some practical tips?
Well, using a structured model is a good way to start, like we talked about. Gibbs's reflective cycle gives you a clear roadmap you can follow. It makes sure you're hitting all the important points in your reflection.
Right, you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly. Another thing you can do is keep a reflective journal. Write down your experiences, what you learned, how you evaluated things. It's amazing how powerful that can be over time. You can see how much you've grown, what patterns keep coming up, and you can always go back and revisit what you learned.
So it's like a record of your journey.
Yeah, a learning log. Talking to people you trust is helpful too. Bouncing your reflections off of friends, mentors, colleagues, even your boss can give you a new perspective. They might see things you missed, and that can be really valuable.
It's easy to get stuck in your own head sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. And make sure you actually schedule time for reflection. If you don't, it'll get pushed aside by other things. Treat it like an important meeting, but with yourself.
Pencils it in.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask yourself tough questions like, what assumptions was I making? Did my emotions get in the way? What other ways could I have done this? Those kinds of questions help you go deeper and really understand what's going on.
Love it. These are all really great tips. Now, are there any downsides or criticisms of these approaches we should talk about?
Yeah, there are a few things to keep in mind. With Gibbs, the biggest thing is that it can feel mechanical if you're not really engaged with it. It can also feel too rigid if the experience was really complex or emotional. And of course, it only works if you're being honest with yourself, which can be hard.
It takes effort.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
What about street epistemology? What are your thoughts?
Well, it seems like it could come across as confrontational, even if you don't mean it that way.
Yeah, that's a good point. It really depends on the dynamic of the conversation and how open the other person is. And some people say it can be used to just win arguments, not to actually understand each other.
So it can be abused.
Right. What about reflective evaluation in general? What do you think?
I guess the hardest part is being objective about yourself.
Yeah, that's true for all of this. Our biases and feelings can definitely color how we see things. And you have to be willing to really look at yourself honestly, which can be uncomfortable.
It takes courage.
It does.
Okay, let's do a quick recap of the key differences between Gibbs's and street epistemology, and then maybe we can think about how they might work together.
Okay, so the main thing is that Gibbs's is all about you. It's introspective, focused on your own experience and what you can learn from it. Street epistemology is about interaction, dialogue. It's about understanding where beliefs come from and scrutinizing them.
Right, so one is about your actions and what happens because of them, and the other is about the reasoning behind what you believe.
Exactly. But they can actually work together really well. Like imagine you have a tough conversation with someone and you use some street epistemology techniques to try to understand their point of view. Afterwards, you could use Gibbs's to reflect on the conversation itself. How did it go? What did you learn about how you communicate? What would you do differently next time?
So you're using that external dialogue to fuel your own internal reflection.
Yeah, exactly. They both help you think more critically and reflectively, just in different ways. One is about learning from your own experiences. The other is about learning through interacting with others and examining beliefs.
So to sum it all up for you, our listener, whether you're looking at your own experiences with something like Gibbs's or having conversations to understand beliefs with something like street epistemology, these reflective practices are super valuable. They help you keep learning and growing as a person.
And the cool thing is, you don't have to choose just one. Gibbs gives you that step-by-step process for self-reflection, and street epistemology gives you these tools for exploring beliefs through conversation. And reflective evaluation is that bigger picture that ties everything together. You get this whole toolbox for self-improvement and critical thinking.
You can mix and match to fit your needs.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So here's something to think about. Think about a recent decision you made, or maybe something you strongly believe in. How could going through Gibbs's cycle give you a new perspective on that decision? Or how could you use some of the questioning techniques from street epistemology to really examine the basis of that belief? And what would happen if you sat down and did some serious reflective evaluation? What would you learn about yourself and the assumptions you're making? Think about it. These ideas can help you long after we're done talking today.
Yeah, give them a try and see what happens.